Welcome back to part 2 of the Jeweler's low-grade floor sweeps. What I have here is another dish that I had cooling off in a different location. I forgot about it, so we're going to start off by putting this through our wire mesh here. What I'll do is grind up the material in this dish in a mortar and pestle. Now I'm going to try to hand separate some of this material, pick it out of there by hand mechanically. Stones, karat gold, and silver. This is all junk that's not suitable to go in with our group to refine. Let's hit this with the magnet one more time. Since we got it all spread out. It does have some magnetic material in it, but it's all very finely divided. So now what we'll do is get this into this container. Still gonna have a little bit of metal in it. Set this off to the side. And now what we'll do is bring this over to our pan here, dump this out and see what we got going on in here. This is all the magnetic material, and there's probably going to be some like tiny solder chips, some little gold rings that were used to connect catches to chains, and material like that in this magnetic material. And so what I'm trying to do is go ahead and pick through this by hand and get as much of that magnetic material out of there as possible. Start clearing some of this stuff out of here. Get some room going on in here. This is all junk. And we'll put that in a bag and give it back to the jeweler. This is our material that I think may be karat gold. Put it in the melt dish. These are the stones, and I'll give those back to the jeweler. And I think this stuff in here might be silver. So I'm going to put that in the melt dish. And then I got this little bit of material up here. Not quite sure what this stuff is. We'll just add this right into the melt dish.
Now we're going to take this over to the melt table and try to melt this up into a button.
Here's our button of metal that we just melted, and I've done a couple tests on it. It's mostly silver, and I didn't detect any gold in there with the acid test. So we're going to set this aside and maybe use it to incord the gold later on once we get that far into it. But for right now, what I'm going to do is this is our finely divided powder that we screened out. And I'm going to get a couple of spoons of this down into this beaker here. Piece of steel saw blade there. Here I have some Ruto professional drain opener, which according to the data sheet is 93% concentrated sulfuric acid. We're going to add a little bit of that sulfuric acid to our material in this jar here. Just pour it right on in. Here I have some 29% hydrogen peroxide. And what I'll do now is measure a little bit of that out into this beaker here. I'm going to slowly start dribbling in some of the 29% hydrogen peroxide. And let's see what happens here, just a little at a time. Get a vigorous reaction. This solution is called Piranha solution. And what it's supposed to do is dissolve organic material that's carbon based. Apparently what it does is it converts the carbon and the other elements into carbon dioxide and water. So I'm trying to use that to dissolve out some of the black carbon that came from the incineration of this material. The piranha solution will not dissolve the metal. It gets left behind.
I'm going to put in a dab more sulfuric acid.
I don't have a lot of experience working with this piranha solution, so I'm moving real slow. If this stuff gets on your skin, it'll dissolve your flesh down to the bone.
Measuring out a little bit more hydrogen peroxide. I add that in slowly. Trying to see if I can see anything settling out down on the bottom of this beaker. Should be some metallic residue down there, and I do see a little bit down here. I think what we'll do is just I'm going to rinse down the outsides with a little bit of hydrogen peroxide. We'll just let this settle out and see what we got. Definitely see that the solution is cleared up a bit, and I've got a layer of solids down on the bottom down here. And so what I think I'm going to do is add a little bit more of the hydrogen peroxide and let this, put it on time lapse and let it settle out and see what. Allowed this to settle completely. So now what we're going to do is go ahead and pull the solution off the solids. Got a little distilled water. I'm going to add it to this beaker and see what happens. Adding a few drops of hydrochloric acid. See what that does. I don't see any reaction there. I'm going to rinse down the beaker with some distilled water. I've got a funny feeling that this is going to be totally fruitless. There's nothing in this black powder. I hate to think it, but I don't think there's any metals in this powder up here in this beaker. There's sulfuric acid in here, but I think I've got it dilute enough to where I can use a paper filter to filter the solids out of this. So that's what we're going to try to do here. Let's put some hydrochloric acid in with our solids. Got a stir bar here. I'm adding some nitric acid. We're going to hit this material hard with some hot aqua regia. Turn on the stir bar, turn on some heat, and let this cook in hot aqua regia. To get some of this solution, a piece of filtered paper, and we're going to check. Of course, man, there's kind of black mess in there that's going to interfere with the test a little bit. But we should be able to tell if we've got any precious metals in here. Let's see what we got. Can't really tell. Turn the stir bar off. Turn the heat off and let this cool down a little bit. Alright, there we got a little bit of solution on there. Let's do a test on this. See what we got. It's kind of hard to tell. Looks like there may be some precious metals in that solution. This is the solution that we filtered from our solids. I'm going to add a little bit of hydrochloric acid to see if we get any kind of reaction. Test for silver. I don't see anything. No reaction. So this is just a waste solution. Got this cooled down. I think now we can go ahead and see if we can filter this out a little bit. Got the solution pulled out of those solids. Let's get a status test on this and see where we're at. See if we've got any gold in this solution. Okay, we've got a positive test. It's not much, but for 2 tablespoons of material we did this test run on, we should be able to get a little bit more out of the rest of this black material back here in our beaker. They're in there yelling at me about the turkey being ready, so I'm going to go in here and get something to eat. But before we do that, let's see if we can put some sodium metabisulfite in here and precipitate out this gold. Let's see what happens here. It's not that much, so it's going to precipitate out real slow.
Alright, I had turkey, mashed potatoes and gravy, green bean casserole, stuffing, yeast rolls, sweet potato casserole, and all the fixings.
This verifies that we've got some gold in those solids up here in this beaker. And so now what we're going to do is try to use a filter to get the gold collected in this filter. That's a pretty decent amount of gold there. Ain't too shabby for 2 tablespoons. And that's probably going to be a half a gram or something like that. I think this will pull through much quicker if you guys put a gasket in here. There's our gold. Take it to the melt table and see what kind of yield we got from those 2 heaping tablespoons. Okay, here's our little gold bead that we just melted from those 2 heaping tablespoons of material out of this beaker. Let's see what this thing weighs. That's 0.4 grams. That was from 2 heaping tablespoons. There's probably 30 heaping tablespoons in that beaker right now. So if you divide that by 2, that's 15 times 0.4. That should be about 6 grams of pure gold that we can recover from this powder. I've got this button of metal that we melted earlier, and I've got some more scrap that belongs to the jeweler. And so once we get the gold out of here, we'll combine it. We'll then quart it with this button here that's mostly silver. And we'll do a complete refining on all this jeweler's scrap and try to get him a good number for a yield. What we're going to do is concentrate on getting the gold out of this powdered material from our incineration. It's going to add some hydrochloric acid. Now what I'll do is start adding small amounts of nitric acid in here to form aqua regia to extract the gold out of this finely divided material. What we'll do is put this on time lapse and just let it react.
I added about another 50 milliliters of nitric acid, and I just left it on the heat, let it react, turned some heat up on it, and kept an eye on it, stirred it occasionally, and watched for the fume production to clear up a little bit in there.
I've had this on boiling now for several hours, and I'm fairly certain that we've got everything that we're going to get out of this, out of these solids. So I'm going to pull it down off the heat now. We'll let this cool off for a few minutes. Got our solution cooled off. We're gonna dip a piece of filter paper in here and get a stannous test. See what kind of gold we've got going on in here. Oh, that's a good dark stain there. That's a decent amount of gold. Everything extracted from these solids that I can possibly pull.
I ran out of room in that first funnel, so I had to prepare a second funnel to continue filtering all the liquid off of these solids. This material was very loose, and I was able to rinse it off easily by adding hydrochloric acid and stirring it with a glass rod.
Here's our solution. Should have our gold in it. I'm going to go ahead and add some stump out and precipitate out the pure gold now.
Please remember, I'm still in the recovery mode. We're not in the refining mode yet. The goal here is to just get the gold out of that dirty, nasty green liquid. I was very impressed by the amount of gold here, but it turns out that this is what they call a false yield, because there's some other material in there that's coming down with the gold, making it look like there's more gold than there really is.
Let's reach down here and get a stannous test. Make sure we've got all the gold out of solution. And you can tell by that negative stannous test, all the gold has been dropped. I'm going to get the gold out of that solution into this filter paper and see if we can get a yield from this material.
Wow, look at all the gold in the bottom of that beaker. Looks like an ounce and a half. And that really got my hopes up that we're going to get a nice fat yield. Looks like about an ounce and a half, maybe 2 ounces of gold in the bottom of that beaker. It's Thanksgiving night. I'm stuffed full of turkey and dressing, and I'm going to go lay down and take me a nap. And this filtering turned out to be painfully slow. That's an indication that there's some junk in there. And when I got down to the bottom of the filter paper, there's a little surprise for the refiner.
All right, I got some kind of precipitate forming in here. I have no clue what that is. I don't know what this stuff is. I've got some hot water. Let's see if we can get it to dissolve with some hot water.
This is wishful thinking by Sri Tips. The hot water did not dissolve that precipitate. This is typical for jewelers scrap off the floor like this. It could be anything. Who knows what compounds form from these types of scrap from the jeweler's floor.
Yeah, the hot water didn't do it. So before we can get the rest of this gold out of here, which that's a significant amount of gold, what I'll do is just take this filter out, put a new one in, and see if we can strain the rest of this gold powder so we can get it melted up and get a yield. I might have a little gold in it, so I'll save it and put it in my paper storage. For right now, what we're going to do is go ahead and put a new filter in and get this gold down in this filter now.
It's late. I'm tired. I'm glad that this is over. And based on my experience, it looks like we've got a lot of gold here. All we got to do is melt it up.
Yeah, that looks really good, man. It's there's a lot more gold in here than I'd anticipated. That's going to be good news for the jeweler. Let's pour a little of this hot water through here.
The perfect end to a long night. Putting the gold and the filter paper right into a crucible there. I was going to use a MAP gas torch to do the entire melt. But for some reason, whatever compound was in there caused that paper to become fire retardant. It would not burn. I wish I'd have put the clock in the background there. I didn't do that. But this is at least 10 minutes of constant flame on this gold in the filter. And finally I had to break out the acetylene torch and just go all in and get it melted. And I was trying to get a button, but I didn't even get that. I had to pour it in some water.
I've never seen anything like this. It created some sort of super hybrid fireproof material or something. And the gold did not melt up very well. But at least now we've got something here we can calculate a yield. All right, we're gonna get this gold out of here. I don't know what was in this stuff to cause it to melt like it did. There was some kind of junk in there that just created a mess here, man. All right, let's get the rest of this stuff down into a milk dish, like so.
Fire always works. Fire purifies, clarifies, and cuts through all the nonsense. And I thought, just do a nice, easy remelt, come up with a nice button of gold. But then when I got it molten, the gold started spitting and sputtering little balls of gold up from the main mass there, all over the inside of the melt dish.
This stuff just is not cooperating.
I decided to do the remelt with some MAP gas. It's not quite as hot a flame as the oxyacetylene. And you can see it still started popping and banging a little bit, spitting balls of gold out from the main mass. And I think this is due to the outgassing that came from some of the impurities that still exist in the gold. Finally, I got it to calm down and was able to get it melted up into a central mass.
This is the silver that we got when we did the melt earlier. It's 29.7 grams, mostly silver. Here's the button that we just melted up from the black powder. It's 11.5, that's way more than I was expecting. And here's the little bead from the test run we did of the 2 tablespoons. So we've got 11.9 grams of pure gold and our silver button. We've got a nice yield for the jeweler, 11.9 grams. I've got this silver, and I was going to refine this in this video also, but I think I'm going to call it right here. We'll do this later on off camera, and I'll put this and this together and quart it with this silver and do a complete refining. But for now, this will conclude part 2 of the Jeweler's Floor Mat Recovery and Refining series of videos. Thank you for watching.